Alright, hi, this is going to be a overview slash review of my problems with the MAXX hop-up unit for the VFC SCAR, and I guess a more general review of MAXX in general. Two things I want to come out with first is, A, I am not a professional. I don't know anything about anything, especially about airsoft guns. I'm not a tech, nor have I ever been a tech. Therefore, take all of my advice with a bit of a grain of salt, although I do try to be professional and objective. And two, I really appreciate MAXX's customer service. During the construction of this, I lost one of the parts, and they very, very kindly provided me with a replacement part within the next 3 days, and I was able to fix and finish my project gun that this was for very quickly, even though I had lost the part. So I really appreciate that. Unfortunately, the project gun is, as you can still see, in pieces, and it's in pieces because of the issues with MAXX, which we will get to right now. So first off, we need to talk about the regular hop-up unit. Before we talk about MAXX, we need to talk about the version 2 hop unit, what it is and what it does. Because this is the reason why the MAXX unit doesn't work quite right. So as you can see here, this is a super normal, super boring version 2 hop unit. Let me go ahead and grab a magazine. Great. Okay, as I was saying, this is a super normal, super boring version 2 hop unit. And this part here, that I'm indicating with my screwdriver, this I'm going to call the feeding tube. Because when I put my magazine into the gun, this is a stock VFC SCAR L magazine, I put it into the gun, and the BBs are under spring pressure, and they come out this tube, and this is the plug that holds the BBs in place. This goes into, where the feeding tube goes into the magazine, pushes the stopper or plug in the magazine away, and the spring pressure shoots the BBs up into the hop-up unit and into feeding and firing position, which is of course in line with the barrel. Now on the VFC SCAR, there is no feeding tube on the hop-up unit. The feeding tube is rather part of the lower receiver. You can see it here. This is the feeding tube. When you buy a new lower receiver for your VFC SCAR, you get a whole new feeding tube with it. And of course, the hop-up unit that VFC designed for the SCAR, this one also has no feeding tube. Solid tube, and this is just empty space. This just holds the hop-up unit in place. This does nothing for feeding. This is the feeding tube. And this is why I know there's an issue with the hop-up unit, the MAXX hop-up unit, and not with the VFC SCAR itself. Because when you put a magazine into the VFC SCAR, if you have the magazine release buttons in place, the magazine will lock in, and the BBs will just fly out the top of the feeding tube because they're not under retention anymore. And this low receiver does that because this low receiver is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The magazine is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The issue is the hop-up unit. Now, I haven't shown you the hop-up unit I have yet. It's a completely normal stock VFC, MAXX VFC hop-up unit. Let me get it up. As you can see, normal and boring. No, I did not accidentally buy the wrong MAXX hop-up unit type. Why do I know that? Because I have a normal MAXX hop-up unit type. It's right here. This came out of my M16. So that's what's wrong with the... That's why I know there's something wrong with the MAXX hop-up unit itself. Number two, why I know there's something wrong with the MAXX hop-up unit itself is because I can literally see the problem happening. Because one of the things you guys did was you put in a little, I think it's Lexan or glass or plastic or something, a little Lexan viewing port here. I think this is only meant for your tracer hop-up LEDs. Regardless, this is probably the best idea anybody has ever had for a hop-up unit, because it means I can see what's going on inside of it. And when I look through the hop unit, I can see BBs coming up into the hop unit and not going into firing position. They are not in line with the barrel. They are right about here. Not quite up to where they should be. A little millimeter or so of difference. Now, when I take a BB and I just drop it into my VFC SCAR, and I just drop it into feeding position, and then I install my lower receiver with its gearbox, and the gearbox isn't in right now because I'm trying to fix my gun. I can see what the BB's position should be. I don't know if I can show this on camera, but you can see how deep it rides. Just a little sliver of white. It is touching the bucking now. And then you push it and it falls through the barrel, just like normal. But it doesn't do that. And it doesn't do that because there is something in the way. And what is in the way is this shelf. Let me get this in position. So you see this little bit of metal right here, where there's the semicircle cut out? This is just a bit too far back, and the BBs are not being forced into firing position. They're being forced against this shelf, and they can't actually get as high as possible. And this is why when you push the hop-up unit forward using your finger or a screwdriver or anything, you can see the BBs going into place. Now this means, oh, well, all you have to do is secure it into the rifle with a spacer or something. Well, of course, I don't have a spacer unless one is provided to me. I made a spacer, though. Let me show it to you. Here is a completely normal and boring VFC SCAR L gearbox. The only thing fancy about this one is I've removed some of the screws. And you can see here I have tape on it. Why do I have tape on it? Because I made a spacer for my gun. So it just pushes the hop unit a millimeter or so forward, and in doing so allows the shelf to stop blocking the BBs. This one is made out of a US 25-cent piece. It's what we call a quarter. And as you can see there, I just tape it to the front of my gearbox. Super messy and dumb and blunt and simple, but it does its job. I think this is probably one of your better solutions because you won't have to do anything different to your actual design. I believe you make these with CNC, so changing them shouldn't be too hard. But you would still have to change how far it's being programmed to drill, and that might be an inconvenience. So as I see it, you guys have a couple of possible solutions here. Solution 1 is shorten the length of that shelf. Solution 2 is to give the player a number of spacers in differing sizes that they can put on the front of their gearbox to space that hop-up unit as forward as it needs to be. Just like a shim. Super blunt and cheap, and it fixes the problem. Mostly. I'm still having some feeding issues with this gun, but that is also because in my attempts to make sure that I didn't have an issue with the nozzle, that it was an issue with the hop-up unit, I made a modified air nozzle for my VFC SCAR. As you can see, this one, it looks a bit short. Here's a fairly standard nozzle. And I thought, oh, maybe the air nozzle is blocking it, and no, it turns out it wasn't. But even with the spacer in place, as long as the spacer's in place, the BBs are not feeding into the gun properly. I'm getting double fires, I'm getting misfires, I'm getting a failure to feed and fire. I'm also getting that annoying effect where the BB goes out, but it flies out the barrel like 10 FPS. Something is going wrong there, so maybe you do need to shorten the shelf. I don't know. I'm, again, not a tech, I'm just some guy, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with my gun and your product. And it's hard to do if you're an idiot like me. I want to say again, I really do appreciate what you guys are doing here, because VFC, the VFC SCAR is not very well designed. Some parts of it, all of it generally works, but it's a bit fragile. Case in point, the stock VFC hop-up unit. And this gets into my second point. What we VFC SCAR owners want is not maybe what you guys usually sell. MAXX seems to be a company that sells products to airsofters who love to tinker, who want the absolute best performance out of their gun possible. And that's great, but VFC SCAR owners don't want that, because what they have is something that just doesn't work. The VFC hop unit works great, but the issue is, as you can see, there's supposed to be an adjustment dial here. Just like on the stop hop-up unit, there's an adjustment dial, right? It's the exact same layout. And the issue is, this hop-up unit is made out of plastic, so sooner or later, that cylinder that the screw holding the adjustment dial onto, that cylinder breaks, and the adjustment dial falls off, and therefore the hop-up unit is completely useless. We don't want something that's completely top of the line, completely perfect, and completely flawless. We just want something that works to any degree for an extended period of time. It might be in your guys' best interest just to copy this. And what would certainly be appreciated by VFC owners, even if you don't copy this, which is fine, that's your decision, not mine, is copy these little guides here, these angled pieces. These are guides, because when you're closing your VFC, right, the barrel is in place. The hop-up unit is in place. This is locked into the upper receiver of the gun. And your low receiver and your gearbox slides in, and it pushes against this, and it pushes the hop-up unit forward and then slides into place, and the spring pushes it back against the barrel of the gun. But since you guys have just a harsh shelf and not the guides, it gets stuck on that, and you have to stick a little screwdriver or your finger or something in there into the false shell ejection port, and you have to literally push this forward, and then you can get the low receiver on, because otherwise it just gets stuck on these harsh edges. You need to make these angled, just like the normal VFC hop-up unit. Again, I really appreciate what you guys are doing, but the execution just isn't there yet. But I'm really optimistic, and I hope this design is improved just a little bit more, and it gets to that perfectly functional state, because if it does, you've made something really unique and valuable, and something every VFC SCAR owner will appreciate. This is definitely an open market, and it's one worth you guys investing in, because the other CNC hop-up units that are available aren't good, and the stock VFC hop-up units are too fragile and break. So this is a market that is open and will always be open to some extent, as long as people are still selling VFC SCARs, and of course they are. Anyway, but yeah, I unfortunately the hop-up unit just isn't working right now. Hopefully you guys go and make some modifications to it so that it will start working, or give us some spacers or something, and also hopefully put on the angled guides on the hop-up unit itself. Other than that, not too much going on. Hopefully my precious VFC SCAR will be back in one piece sooner rather than later. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. I really appreciate it, and thanks for the awesome customer service. I really wish you guys good luck, and I hope you do well.